you're going to lose weight and you're going to lose body fat, but you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass. And this is where people end up looking too frail or skinny fat, or like some of these undesirable outcomes that people end up with where they've lost a lot of weight, but they don't love the way they look and feel. That's because they lost a lot of weight. They didn't strength train. They didn't get enough protein in, and they lost way too much muscle mass. And in the process, not only did they do some damage to their aesthetic and they lost strength and functionality, but they also wrecked their metabolism. What's up, everybody? My name is Matt Portwood, if you don't know me, and I am the founder of a sustainable weight loss coaching program called Healthy and Whole. And today I'm going to do a training on how to get toned, because I interview a lot of people and we work with a lot of folks, women in particular, but some men. And probably the most common goal that we hear when we interview and start working with women in particular is that they want to get toned. And so today we're going to break down how you do that. And we're going to go deep. We're going to talk about all of the sort of the base requirements of getting toned. And we're even going to start by talking about what the heck is toned, really. So let's dive in and let's start with really who the heck I am and why you should even listen to me. So again, a lot of you who are watching this already know who I am, but some of you won't. So who am I? Like I said, my name is Matt Portwood. I created a sustainable weight loss health coaching program called Healthy and Whole. And we basically teach people how to take the monumental task of losing weight and creating a lifestyle change that actually produces that result, but to make it not suck. We teach people how to turn it into something that is enjoyable, something that is convenient in the ways that it needs to be convenient so that they can actually do it with real life and real people. And we also help them to grow personally along the way. And so we've helped hundreds of people at this stage of my career to do that. And if you follow me on social media, you see all sorts of great results of that. So that's why you should listen to me. Also because I'm a human being, and I have been a human being who was not toned and who was overweight and who was really struggling with that at different points of my life. And now I'm a human being who is by no means shredded. Like, I'm not going to walk onto a physique competition stage tomorrow and place even remotely well. But just as like someone who walks around in day-to-day life, I have what I would consider a good amount of tone, right? I get good compliments, sun's out, guns out, all the stuff. So that's why you should listen to me, because A, I've done it, and we've now coached literally hundreds of people through the process of learning how to do it as well. So how do we get toned? Well, let's start off with what the heck is toned, really. Essentially, being toned is, to put words to it, is an aesthetic that people are looking for. And to be fair, there's different degrees of toned. There's like shredded, like these people who literally walk onto physique competition stages and they have literally peeled every ounce of body fat that they possibly could off of their body. They have even dehydrated themselves to the point where literally you can see just every muscular striation and vein popping out on their body. It's not the most attractive. Most people don't want to get to that level of toned. That's kind of beyond toned to a level of unhealthy being shredded. And those people don't walk around that way all the time. What we're really looking for when we say toned is an aesthetic where we have dropped our body fat percentages down to a level where the muscle tissue that we have is now peeking through, right? We have lines like you see here in my shoulder. We have triceps and stuff like that popping through. And we overall feel great about how we look and how we feel. We can take our shirt off at the beach. We can go get ourselves into a bathing suit. We can feel comfortable in intimate situations, all that good stuff. And that's what toned is. It's basically just lowering your body fat percentage down to the point where the muscle that's underneath shows through in a shapely way that is flattering and complimentary and that feels great. The struggle that most people have is quantifying, like, what does it take to get there and what does there actually look like? So I'm going to give you some body fat ranges that typically for women and men equate to looking toned. And hopefully this will also just give you an idea of, like, hey, wherever I'm starting right now, whatever weight or whatever body fat percentage my scale or whatever measurement tool that I'm using says that I am, that this is how far that I probably will need to go to actually get toned. Because I find that is something that a lot of people struggle with, is they may start off with the goal of being toned, but once they actually start, sometimes they kind of give up hope that they'll ever actually get there. And that really more speaks to the lack of sustainability in the approach that they're taking. But this will give you an idea of where you're starting and where you need to get to. So goal body fat percentages for women and men. I'm going to start with men because I don't know if you've noticed this, but I am a man. And I can speak to that with more life experience. So as a man, most men start to feel relatively toned, sub 15% body fat, meaning that when they get to 15% or below, they start to really feel like they enjoy the way their body looks. They're starting to see good tone in their shoulders, in their arms, in their chest, all that good stuff. The optimal range for men is really anywhere between 10% and 15%. If you are a male at 10% body fat to 12% body fat, you are pretty toned. Like, you are pretty cut. I walk around right now at about between 10 and I hover between 10 and 12% body fat. I'm not going to do it right now, but if I pull up my shirt, you'll see definition in my abs. You can see definition in my arms. You can see veins popping through different places. I'm not shredded and peeled, but I am toned and I get a lot of good compliments and I feel great about how I look and feel. 10 to 12% is where most men will feel the absolute best. When you get under 10%, you start to get to like 8 to 10%. That's like shredded. People who walk on physique stages oftentimes get closer to like 6%. So it can get, that's not healthy. That's not a place you want to be all the time. But if you are competitive and you want to get to that place, you can. But for most men, somewhere between 10 and 15%, 10 to 12% is kind of like really good. For women, I have noticed with all the women that I've coached, I have noticed that most women start to just really feel amazing around somewhere between 20 and like 23, 24%, where they are what I would call a healthy degree of toned, meaning women naturally carry more body fat no matter what. On their body because they bear children, et cetera, et cetera. They naturally carry less muscle mass than men. So therefore they naturally carry more body fat than men. And so that's why the discrepancy between the range for men being 10 to 15%, with women, they usually start to feel really good, like 20 to 23, 24%. Once you get under 20% for women, you start to get really lean. Like, I've coached women before who, they got down into the 14, 15% range and they had very defined abs. Beneath that is when they get shredded, right? When you're starting to get down into the 12% range and 10 to 12% range, they're probably starting to get shredded for stage and things like that. So if you're a woman, 20% is a kind of like a basic goal that you could strive for if you want to be really toned, 20 to 24, 23, 24%. For men, 15% is a good starting goal. Just get there. And then you can refine from there. And if you want to feel really amazing as a man, 10 to 12%. For most guys, they feel absolutely amazing in that range. And for women, if you wanted to push it a little bit further, maybe 17 to 20% would be more elite if you wanted to go by that range. Next, we get into the conversation of, well, okay, we want to lose body fat, and that reveals the shapeliness of the muscle. So the muscle is important as well. And so this is, I think, really important when we're talking about the goal of being toned. Because if we're trying to be toned, it's one part losing body fat, but it's the other part having muscle mass that looks good when we get that body fat off. So the more muscle mass that you have on your body, the less body fat you will have to strip off in order to have that shapeliness that you really want, that aesthetic that you really want. So it stands to reason that, yes, we want to lose body fat, but we also want to have as much muscle mass on our body as possible, which is why when we get later into the requirements to get best results for getting toned, strength training is definitely going to be one of those things that we're going to talk about. So I just want you to keep in mind as we go, it's not just about stripping off body fat. Stripping off body fat is definitely necessary because you can have a ton of muscle mass and not be able to have the definition and the tone that you want because you just got too much body fat on top of that muscle mass. And you can have less muscle mass, but if you strip enough body fat off, you can also look very toned and very fit. But there's a nice Goldilocks zone or happy medium where you have as much muscle mass as you can have while stripping that body fat down. And you don't have to go so extreme in either direction. Okay. So let's start diving into how to lower your body fat percentage while maintaining or building muscle. Because that's kind of like the real gold standard that we want to go for here. Okay. So first, let's get into how to sustain a healthy calorie deficit. Because yes, if we're talking about fat loss, we're essentially talking about weight loss. And if we're talking about weight loss, that means that you have got to get into and sustain a healthy calorie deficit. In order to do that, there will be people out there on the internets who will try to argue that you do not have to be in a calorie deficit to do this. And I'm not going to get into a huge debate about it, but I will simply say that it is very rare that you will achieve the result you want without being into a calorie deficit, either without drugs or some other thing that's going on. But either way, you're going to get into a healthy calorie deficit. Just accept that. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about what is a healthy calorie deficit. Well, an unhealthy calorie deficit would be one where you're losing like way too much weight, way too fast. That would be an unhealthy calorie deficit where you have basically eliminated so many calories that your body is under an immense amount of stress, and you're essentially starving yourself. You're not getting enough protein, nutrition in general. You're probably way hungrier than you should be, and you're losing a lot of weight, but unfortunately, you're probably losing way more muscle mass than you are body fat in that circumstance. So we want a healthy calorie deficit, which is a healthy rate of weight loss, which means that we're losing predominantly body fat. We're always going to potentially lose a little bit of muscle mass when we're dropping body fat, no matter what we do, unless we're on drugs, performance enhancing drugs or testosterone, things like that. And so most people are not going to do that, and most people should not do that. So we're going to accept that we're going to lose a little bit of muscle mass while we're losing body fat, and we'll gain that back later. Okay, we'll do that in a healthy way. Right now, we're talking about stripping off the body fat through a healthy calorie deficit. So, what is a healthy rate of fat loss or weight loss? Well, this is dependent on where you're starting. Because if you are someone who has 100, 120, 130, 150, 200 pounds to lose, really anybody who has, I would say, like over 75 pounds, 50 to 75 pounds to lose. When you start to get up in those higher amounts of weight that you have to lose, you have a higher tolerance for losing weight a little bit faster in the beginning. So, if you have 100, 150 pounds to lose, you can get away with losing 3 pounds a week in the beginning, at least. And as long as you're doing some other things correctly, like strength training and being active and getting enough protein in your diet, all that stuff, you're probably going to be just fine. Right. But if you only have 20 pounds to lose and you are losing 3 pounds a week, you're losing too fast. That's an unhealthy calorie deficit. You're probably losing way too much muscle mass along the way, and your end result's not going to be what it could have been in the end. So we want to be careful about getting into too deep of a calorie deficit. So just understand, the more weight you have to lose, the higher you can go. I really would never go over 3 pounds a week for any prolonged amount of time, even if you do have a massive amount of weight to lose. And some people, if you have a lot of weight to lose, like we've worked with some clients who have, 150 to 200 pounds to lose before. And it's hard to not lose at a very fast rate when you start working with those clients. So sometimes it kind of is what it is, depending on the client. But generally speaking, three pounds per week is kind of the upper limit if you have a lot of weight to lose. But a more healthy rate of fat loss to maintain muscle mass would probably honestly be, if you have a lot of weight to lose, you can tolerate 1.5 to 2.5 pounds of fat loss, weight loss per week for a good while. If you're in a lower rate range and you don't have a ton to lose, really more like 1 pound per week is a good rate of weight loss, fat loss. That's a good long-term, sustainable, healthy rate that is not going to result in a massive amount of muscle loss that you're going to have to try to figure out later. Okay. So next we get into counting calories versus not counting your calories. And if you are going to count your calories, what should your goal be and all that stuff. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because this could be an entire other video. In fact, it probably will be an entire other video to talk about the whole debate around counting calories and macros and what goals should be and whether you actually should count calories and macros or not. Hint, in our program, Healthy and Whole, we actually, all of the results that we get, we do without counting calories and macros. Our entire curriculum is set up to teach people from day one how to get sustainable results without counting calories and macros. So it is very possible. You just need to know how to do it. But I understand that since I can't really teach that in this video, a lot of you probably are going to be out there counting calories and macros. And counting calories and macros can work. Hands down. There's nothing wrong with that method. It's just that for a lot of people, counting calories and macros is not super sustainable. So for a lot of people, they're going to start counting calories and macros, and then they're going to get burnout and they're going to fall off of the habit. And then since they're not counting calories and macros anymore, they're going to start gaining the weight back and then they're starting over. So it is effective, particularly if you can do it for the rest of your life. But if you can't, then that's a little bit of a problem. And then we need to be figuring out how to do it without. But if you're going to count calories and macros, there are calorie calculators out there on the internet that you can use. I'll be 100% honest. I believe that those calculators, I'll just tell you right now, are basically guessing. You're going to put in your basic parameters like your weight and your height, and it's going to ask you, things like how active you are. Are you sedentary? Are you lightly active? Are you moderately active? Are you very active? And it's going to spit out a guess at what your metabolic rate, your metabolism, your metabolic rate is. And it's basically then going to say, okay, do you want to lose 1 pound a week? Do you want to lose 2 pounds a week? Do you want to lose 0.5 pounds a week? And then it'll do a little mathematical voodoo and it'll tell you what calories you should eat every day. Those calculators are literally guessing at how much you should eat and what your calorie intake should be. It's a gross approximation. In my experience, having coached literally hundreds of people, and women in particular, who were not able to lose weight, they had like very frustrated that they were even counting calories and macros and couldn't seem to lose weight. And then they come into our program and now they're being successful. I'll tell you that most of those calculators really overestimate calorie needs for a lot of women in particular. So since we're basically guessing, the only way you would actually know is if you actually did. There are tests you can do where, you can go in and put on like a mask, and the mask in a facility will like measure your CO2 output and all that stuff, and it will give you a more accurate estimation of your actual like basal metabolic rate and all that stuff. But nobody's going to do that. So no matter what, we're just guessing. And so the easier way to guess, rather than using some calculator, is to just take the goal weight that you think you want to be and multiply it by a calorie factor. So if you're starting out, you could multiply your goal weight by anywhere from 10 to 12, right? So if your goal weight is 150 pounds, then you could say, if you want to be conservative and not cut too deep on your calories, you could say, I'm going to say 150 times 12. And that's roughly how many calories I'm going to start eating and tracking to every day. And I'm going to basically monitor my progress over the course of 2 to 4 weeks. And I'm going to weigh myself every single day. And I'm going to take my weights each week and I'm going to add up all 7 weights for the week. And I'm going to get an average. I'm going to divide my total. I'm going to add my weight every day together for 7 days. I'm going to divide it by 7. And then I'm going to get an average weight for the week. And I'm going to track my average weight week by week. And a lot of apps do this too. They will automatically tell you what your average weight is week to week. But you're going to look at your average weight week to week. And if you're losing too fast, then you're going to eat more. You're probably going to increase your calories by 250 to 400 calories, and then track for another week or two and see how your average is going. And if you're not losing too fast, then you're good. If you're losing too slow, then you would remove 250 to 400 calories and see if you can increase your average rate of weekly weight loss, looking at your average weight per week. So using a calorie factor, put your goal weight times 10, 11, 12, whatever factor you want to use. Either way, it's a guess, and then you adjust from there. Okay. So just start doing it, be consistent, and then adjust from there. And once you get it dialed in, all you've got to do is just keep doing it until you reach the levels of body fat that you really want. It's really that simple. A lot of people would argue, well, no, Matt, because the longer you're in a calorie deficit, the harder it gets, and you're going to plateau, and you're going to have to do a bunch of stuff to prevent that from happening. And I once upon a time believed that to be true. And then we started training and coaching people the way we train and coach people now, where we literally monitor their body weight every single day. And we look at the graph of that data. And we've now been able to coach people from day one all the way through their goal without any slowdowns or deviations in their weight loss rate, and without any plateaus, which made me go, interesting. That means that all this gobbledygook on the internet and people saying that the longer you lose weight, the harder it gets, and plateaus and all this stuff happen, and you have to do refeeds, and you got to fix your hormones, and you got to take this supplement, and you got to take that supplement. It's really all bullcrap. It's just, there's other things that are happening, and I'll get to those probably in another training. But maybe a little bit later on this one. But essentially, if you're in a calorie deficit, you will continue to lose weight consistently over time until you get all the way to where you want to be. And then you take yourself out of a calorie deficit and you're good. Most people just don't stay in the calorie deficit long enough to get where they want to be. And that's not because their body's like rebelling. It's because they're tired of the food they're eating. They don't love working out. Their life is blowing up in their face. Their mental, emotional health all over the place. There's a whole lot of other reasons why that typically happens. So should you count your calories and what they should be? I went over the goal for what that should look like for calories. Can you do it without counting calories? Like I said, all of our clients do. We teach them how to do that. It's too complex for me to teach. It's really simple. It's just take too much time for me to teach it in this call. But you can do it. You just need help and coaching, and you need to learn the process for how to do that. Arguably, I think it's better to learn how to do it from the beginning without counting calories and macros, because that way you don't have to unlearn and wean yourself off of counting calories and macros later. But to each their own, either will work. So the second thing, we talked about getting yourself into a calorie deficit. You've got to get yourself into a calorie deficit to start peeling off body fat. You want it to be a healthy calorie deficit, not too fast. And that brings us to number 2, which is you've got to be getting enough protein. If you're putting yourself into a calorie deficit and you're not eating enough protein on a daily basis, you will lose more muscle mass. And people underestimate how important protein intake is. It's probably the most important thing after a calorie deficit, because protein as a food group or macronutrient is extremely filling and satiating. And it's also, you'll hear people talk about it's thermogenic, meaning it takes literally, you have to burn more calories to digest protein than other things. So by eating more protein, you will literally increase your metabolic rate. It's not by a lot. It's not like this massive thing, but it is true. You do increase your metabolic rate just by eating more protein, which is pretty cool. But you've got to make sure you're getting enough protein. How much protein should you eat? I would say you probably need to be eating somewhere between, like, the accepted guidelines are generally between 0.75 grams to 1 gram per pound of goal body weight. Okay. So right now I'm in a maintenance phase. I've been in a maintenance phase for quite a while. I maintain between 150, 155. I'm just a little guy. And so my goal is to eat roughly 150 grams of protein a day. And if I decide, which I very well may, that I want to muscle gain my way up, I want to go into a bit of a bulking phase and I want to go up to 160 or 170, then I'll set my protein goal to 160 or 170. And I'll eat 170 grams of protein per day because that'll be my goal. But you probably, for most people, don't really want to go under 0.75 grams per pound of goal body weight. I love the 1 gram per pound of goal body weight metric just because I feel like it gives us a little bit of margin for error, because if you're tracking calories, chances are you're new to it and you're not the best at it. And the average person overestimates how much they, or I should say the average person underestimates how much they're eating from a calorie standpoint, anywhere from 30 to 50%. So when you talk about protein, a lot of people, I think, overestimate how much they're getting. It's kind of weird. They underestimate calories, but they tend to overestimate how much protein they're getting, which is not a good combination. It's again why we don't teach calorie counting in our program, because it's a bit of a mess anyway. But 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of goal body weight is a good metric to strive for. If you're hitting that consistently and you're in a calorie deficit, you're in a really good, solid spot. Okay. Next is strength training. And strength training is equally as important, Because if you're trying to get toned and you're just going to focus on calorie reduction and you're not going to strength train, you're going to lose weight and you're going to lose body fat, but you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass. And this is where people end up looking too frail or skinny fat, or like some of these undesirable outcomes that people end up with where they've lost a lot of weight, but they don't love the way they look and feel. That's because they lost a lot of weight. They didn't strength train. They didn't get enough protein in, and they lost way too much muscle mass. And in the process, not only did they do some damage to their aesthetic and they lost strength and functionality, but they also wrecked their metabolism, because the bulk of your metabolism, the calories that you burn on a daily basis, comes from the energy that the muscle tissue on your body consumes. So muscle tissue is the most metabolically active tissue in your body, right? So the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn. The less muscle you have, the less calories you burn just sitting down at rest. And so when you lose a lot of muscle mass, your metabolism is now lower than it needs to be. And the problem with your metabolism being lower than it needs to be is that when your metabolism is lower, if you just want to maintain weight, you have to eat less food to even maintain weight than you could before when you had more muscle mass. And if you want to lose weight, you now have to eat even less food because of how little muscle mass you have. So you see how important it is to maintain your muscle mass. Because you don't want to get down to your goal weight and literally barely be able to eat to maintain that. That's where I think, like, when I hear people say, well, I got down to such and such weight and I felt amazing, but it was just impossible to maintain. And it's probably because they lost a lot of muscle mass in the process. Their metabolism was a lot slower than it needed to be, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to be careful. We've got to be strength training. Strength training while we are losing body fat stimulates your bone and it stimulates your muscle in such a way that it sends a very clear message to your body that says, we need this, right? And muscle is a use it or lose it kind of a thing. If we're not utilizing our muscle, our body doesn't want to hold on to something that is metabolically expensive, like muscle is, if it doesn't need it, right? If we're not using it. So that's why if you're super sedentary and you're not active and you're not strength training, anything like that, you lose a lot of muscle mass because you're just not using it, right? Well, man, if you put yourself into a calorie deficit and you're not strength training, now your body's like, man, this tissue is super expensive, uses a lot of energy, and we don't got a lot of energy coming in. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. It's too expensive. So it gets rid of the muscle mass. So you've really got to be strength training. It will improve the way you look and feel. You will stay strong and functional, especially as you age. But more than anything, it will maintain your metabolic rate, which is super duper important. So how much should we strength train? Well, there's a spectrum here. Generally speaking, what I tell people is that 2 workouts a week is not ideal, but is an acceptable minimum. It's better than nothing, okay? If you're only working out 2 days a week, your workouts have got to be longer, because ideally you need to work every group of muscles, meaning like your legs, your chest, your back, your biceps, your triceps, your shoulders, all that stuff at least once a week to get optimal results. You at least need to work everything once a week with the right intensity and the right weights and rep ranges and all that stuff in order to get results. So if you're only working out 2 days a week, then you have to squeeze a lot more into those 2 workouts. But if you do longer workouts twice a week, those workouts are going to be exhausting, but you can do it. It's doable. You can get decent, not optimal, but decent results with 2 days a week. Definitely not optimal. 3 days a week is what I call like a good, sustainable gold standard that yields good results for most people. And because it's only 3 days a week, it is very sustainable for most people because you're working, 3 days a week. Your workouts don't have to be quite as long because you don't have to squeeze as much into them. And, you feel like you have a lot of rest days, which is nice. So 3 days a week, better results than 2. Not best results, but better. But it is probably from a sustainability and a convenience standpoint where it needs to be, probably the gold standard. 4 workouts a week, I think will get you the best results because with 4 workouts a week, we can work the big muscle groups like our legs, our chest, our back. We can work those once a week really hard. And then we can also work smaller muscle groups like our biceps, our triceps, our shoulders, our abs, things like that, twice a week. And that way we can, because they recover faster, we can get optimal results. So from an aesthetic and a strength perspective, we're going to get better results with 4 days a week, but it's a little bit less sustainable because it requires more time and more discipline to maintain that schedule. You've got to have better boundaries in your life and better time management and all that stuff if you're going to work out consistently 4 days a week. And a lot of people, let's face it, they don't. A lot of people, they don't have the time. Let me rephrase. They have the time, but they're not prioritizing that time and managing their time in such a way that allows them to consistently work out 4 times a week. Even more, a lot of people, and I say this because I we work with and coach a lot of women in particular, most women don't love strength training. And so trying to get most women who do not have a love of strength training to work out 4 times a week is a little bit of a stretch, which is why we fall back to 3 as a nice sustainable standard and 2 as an doable minimum. Okay. But it's all better than nothing. So we got to strength train. 2 is an acceptable minimum. 3, sustainable, good results. 4, great results, less sustainable, but totally doable if you manage your life and all your stuff well. Next, we get to basic, just general activity. Walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day. This is not rocket science, but it's basically just to acknowledge that when it comes to your metabolism, you have your basal metabolic rate, which essentially is like if I'm just sitting here not moving at all, my body is still burning energy. So we talked about it before, the more muscle mass you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate, like the more energy you burn just sitting still, which is great. But we also, the other sort of like big chunk of our metabolism, there's a bunch of little things that go into metabolism. I'm not going to cover all that crap here. But the 2 big things are your basal metabolic rate, which is driven mostly by your muscle mass. And then the other part is your daily activity. So walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps burns a considerable amount of calories every day. And if you're not walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day, it's not horrible, but you're missing a lot of opportunity. You're losing out on a huge chunk of metabolism that you could be getting. And what that basically means is if you're trying to get toned and get lean and lose body fat and maintain muscle mass, and you're not going to walk 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day, that's not the end of the world. You can still achieve the same goal. But the reality is you're going to have to eat less food to do it. And I don't know about you guys, but I love food. I love to eat food. Me and food, we're tight. We have a strong, long relationship. It's had its ups and downs. We've had some fights. We make up. We break up. We make up again. But I love food. And so I want to be able to eat as much food as I possibly can and still get the results that I want because food is amazing. So I'd rather try to prioritize walking in addition to working out and maintaining muscle mass, so my activity and my muscle mass can kind of combine to give me a super metabolism, so to speak. That way I can eat more food. That's pretty cool. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times in my life where I'm just like walking 8 to 10,000 steps, not my jam right now. And that's okay. I have learned, and this is something we teach our clients all the time in our program, is we teach our clients how to still be successful when you're not being able to be that active and walk 8 to 10,000 steps. If you can only walk or get 4,000 steps a day, here's the things that you need to tweak in order to do that, right? Calorie cycling and carbohydrate cycling and all that stuff. We teach that stuff as well. So it's possible. You don't have to walk 8 to 10,000 steps a day. It's just that if you do, it's going to increase the amount of calories you burn, which means it's easier to get into a calorie deficit. You don't have to reduce your calorie intake as much, which is always good. Because it's hard to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight in if you're not being very active and you can't eat as many calories to get that in, right? So see how all this stuff starts to come together a little bit. So we've covered that you've got to be in a healthy calorie deficit, not too fast, not too slow, just right. We've covered that you need to get enough protein in, 0.75 to 1 gram goal of protein intake per pound of goal body weight. Whew, that was a lot of words. Strength training is a must. 3 to 4 days a week is most optimal. Walking 8 to 10,000 steps per day. Next, we need to talk about hydration. Not going to spend a ton of time on this because it's really pretty simple. At a minimum, you should probably be drinking at least 64 ounces of electrolyte-infused water a day. What I mean by electrolyte-infused water is it needs to have electrolytes in it. What are electrolytes? So electrolytes, there's a bunch of different electrolytes. The most important one is sodium. So Gatorade, Powerade, all that stuff it's okay. It's not great. A lot of them are, I think, a little bit gimmicky. They don't have really that much from an electrolyte or sodium content in them. But we actually teach our clients in our program, and I'll actually share it with you right now. We teach our clients how to make a poor man's Gatorade, which is a homemade, way more cost-effective electrolyte water flavored solution. And essentially what we say is, hey, take a 32 to 40 ounce water bottle like this one and fill it up with clean water. Put, I would say, somewhere between 1/4 teaspoon and 1/2 teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt in, and then use whatever flavoring that you really like to flavor it up. Otherwise, you're just drinking salt water, and that's not very enjoyable. For instance, we use True Lemonade packets in our house. Lemonade, strawberry lemonade, stuff like that. I love fruit punch flavoring packets, all that stuff. Throw it in there, stir it up. Now you have a homemade Gatorade that has more electrolytes than the gimmicky Gatorade that you buy at the gas station or at the store. So it's actually more effective, but it doesn't cost as much because you're making it at home, and that's just pretty cool. So you need to get at least 64 ounces of electrolyte-infused water a day. That's not optimal. That's just like minimum. Probably better if you got closer to 90 ounces a day, which would be 3 liters roughly, right? Or, if you have a 32 ounce water bottle, 3 refills. If you have a 40 ounce water bottle, two-ish refills will get you there. Some people might need more. There are some people who your hydration needs are just a lot higher because you're super active. You're on your feet a lot. You're out in the heat a lot. You work out a lot. You do tons of cardio. You're a cardio bunny and you love going to Orange Theory and busting your butt, all that stuff. If that's you, you probably need more. Okay. So it's very individual. There's no one number that suits everybody, but I would say that 64 ounces of electrolyte infused water is a good minimum. 90. I keep looking over here to make sure we're still recording because I'd hate to do all this and then find out it didn't record. That would suck. 90 ounces is probably more optimal. So get your electrolyte infused water in. It's super important for fat loss, but more than anything, it's because if you're like cleaning up your diet, reducing your calories, getting your carbohydrate intake in check, getting more protein in, you're working out, you're walking, you're doing everything, and your hydration sucks and you don't have enough electrolytes, you're just going to feel like trash. You're going to have headaches. You're going to have no energy. You're going to feel like you just want to sleep all the time. You're going to have brain fog. You might even get nauseous. Just all of the hyponatremia symptoms are going to be there. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, I should eat more carbohydrates. That's what's missing. And that's not what's missing. Or you're going to be like, I need caffeine. That's definitely not what you need, because then you're going to drink more caffeine and it's going to cause you, because caffeine is a diuretic, that's going to cause you to want to go to the bathroom a lot. And then you're going to urinate and you're going to dehydrate yourself even more. And you're going to make yourself feel even worse. And that's just a vicious cycle that you get into, where you're drinking more caffeine, you're eating more carbs, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So make sure you hydrate. Lastly, sleep. And this one is not last because it's the least important. It's the last one because it's the least sexy. Everybody loves sleep, but it's also, I think, where so many people struggle. But when it comes to fat loss and muscle growth even, sleep is super underestimated. People simply do not understand that most of the weight that we lose, not the body fat, but most of the weight that we lose happens at night when we're sleeping. So like, you're doing all the stuff, your eating is on plan, you're in a calorie deficit, you're walking, you're working out 3 to 4 times a week because that's optimal. And you're doing all this stuff. You're hydrating. It's amazing. You're burning body fat pretty much all the time because you're in that consistent calorie deficit. You're doing all the things. It's 24 hours a day. You're kind of in that calorie deficit and you're burning body fat. You're losing body fat. But, our body tends to drop weight at night. And that's because when we're burning body fat, our body is retaining water. And then we don't experience the weight loss portion of that fat loss, where it actually shows up on the scale, until our body releases that water. And a lot of that water release happens at night when we're sleeping. We literally exhale most of the water that as our body releases that at night. It's weird. It's super sciencey. I don't fully understand it, but it's true. You know this. If you've ever weighed yourself at night and then you weigh yourself in the morning, and you ever notice that most people will drop anywhere from 1 to 3, sometimes even 4 pounds. The other day I went to bed at one weight and I woke up the next morning and I dropped 3.5 pounds. And I was like, yeah, that was awesome, because I slept so well. It was amazing. I had an amazing night of sleep. I slept in. It was awesome. My scale just shot down 3 pounds. And I was like, yeah. But then I'll have a really bad night of sleep and my scale will go up. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Well, that's because when you have a bad night of sleep, it spikes your stress hormones. And your stress hormones, cortisol, epinephrine, all that stuff, cause water retention, cause your body to hold on to water, right? So no bueno. So you got to have good sleep. Also, muscular repair. If we're trying to maintain muscle mass, muscular repair, all sorts of repair processes and all that stuff happens when we're sleeping. Okay. So we don't build muscle all the time. We build muscle when we sleep. We tear the muscle down in the gym. We give it the stimulus and tear that stuff up in the gym so that when we go to sleep, our body can repair it and make it bigger and better than it was before. But that doesn't happen effectively if we're not sleeping. Okay. So whether your focus is fat loss or muscle growth or maintenance, sleep is super important. And I'm telling you right now, if you're not sleeping well and you're struggling to lose weight, that's probably a big part of it. Because not only does it make it physically, biologically hard for fat loss and all that stuff to actually work, and for muscle repair and all that stuff to actually work when we're not sleeping well, the other problem is that those stress hormones, those stress hormones don't just cause water retention. They make us more irritable. They make us more hungry. They make us more, they increase cravings for things like carbohydrates and salty foods and fatty foods and all that stuff. They drive us to want to eat calorie-dense foods. Stress hormones do that. I won't go super deep into the weeds about why, but it happens. So if your sleep is off and you're not sleeping well, you probably notice that you're easily stressed and you're emotional and you're stress eating a lot and you're emotionally eating a lot and you're not choosing healthy food to do it, because healthy food, at least the healthy food that you know how to eat to be healthy, is not giving you the comfort. It's not checking the comfort box that you're looking for when you want comfort. We'll get into that in another call, because we literally teach our clients how to make their healthy food that gets the results taste just as good as their unhealthy food, so that even if they need that comfort food, they can still check that comfort box with healthy, high protein, low carb, low fat food. But we got to be sleeping. Unless you want to feel all over the place, unless you want to feel like crap, unless you want to totally sabotage your body's ability to process fat loss and weight loss effectively, and you want to sabotage your body's ability to repair and maintain or build and improve muscle mass, you got to be sleeping. Okay, so we've covered what being toned is. We've covered pretty much the base requirements for being toned and losing body fat. What we haven't talked about, but needs to be covered, is how you stay toned. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go deep into this, but I do want to touch on it, because there's no sense in you guys going out there and putting all of this work in to get toned just to turn around and get not toned again. So you guys are, what I'm going to talk about right now, you guys are going to hear me just like a broken record talk about this stuff, because this is literally what we do. But how do you stay toned? Well, there's 4 high-level things that you need to focus on in order to stay toned. Number 1 is, while you're getting toned, you need to really make sure you're learning along the way. What I mean by that is, you can't just go and, sign yourself up for some plan and just follow a calorie goal and just log your weight or eat a meal prepped food or whatever it is. Just follow a diet and get to where you want to be and expect to stay there forever. Because diets, for example, are essentially just a set of restrictions that you're following in order to make you follow those rules that will force you into a calorie deficit, for instance, and force you to lose weight. And there's some problems with that, because human beings, we don't like to be forced to do stuff. And we don't like restriction. And restriction's not fun. And also, restriction is rigid, and life is not rigid. We all have families and social lives and social circles and church groups, and we work with other people, and we don't just sit at home in a a hermit in our cottage, not being exposed to other people and things where a diet can be successful. We go out into the world and we interact with human beings, and we go out to eat in restaurants, and we have holidays, and we go on vacations, and we do all this stuff. And a diet or a calorie goal is not very flexible with that. Again, that's why we don't start with calorie counting and macro counting in our program. But what we do is we really focus on educating people, because if I can teach you the deeper, finer details of food and nutrition, then you can control your food and nutrition in any environment. And that's really important. So you got to make sure that you're actually learning and absorbing knowledge and skill and becoming a skilled person. along the way, beyond the skill of just following a diet. That's not the type of skill that I'm talking about. The second thing is you've got to prioritize enjoyability. I know that sounds like dumb, Matt. I want to enjoy my food. Well, it seems common sense. But yet there's a lot of people out there. There are people who are watching this right now who are probably sitting there eating their lunch and wishing that they were eating something else because they're on plan right now. They're on their diet and they're eating their healthy meal and they're like, God, this sucks. This sucks. I can't wait till I reach my goal and I don't have to do this anymore. And that's not a good thing because the second you stop doing what it is you're doing to get the result, you're going to gain the weight right back. So you've got to prioritize enjoyability. Okay. And that's really also a skill. It's learning how do I bridge the gap between the food that I really want to eat and the food that I need to eat to be healthy. Because if you don't understand how to do that, then there's always going to be a very big difference between the food that you want to eat and the food that you need to eat to get the results. And until you learn how to make those the same thing, where the food that you eat to get the results tastes amazing and you love eating it and people around you actually want to eat it and they don't look at it and be like, oh my gosh, what is that? I'd rather eat this pizza over here that I'm eating than have to force myself to eat what you're eating. That looks horrible. We got to learn how to make these things the same thing because the reality is if you don't enjoy what you're doing to get toned, you're not going to stay toned. You're going to get untoned very quickly when you go back to doing the things that you enjoy doing. So you've got to focus on prioritizing, raising the enjoyability of the things that you do to get the results, which is what we do at Healthy and Whole with our clients. The third thing that you've got to do is you've got to optimize for convenience because it doesn't matter how smart you are and it doesn't matter how much you know about food and nutrition and fitness and working out and all this stuff. It doesn't matter how many trainings you watch and how much information you absorb. And it also doesn't matter how amazing the food is that you eat when you're being healthy. Like you could have all the most perfect recipes and the perfect workout program that you just love doing it. It's amazing. But man, if it takes too much time and it takes too much energy and all that stuff in your life when it comes to the amount of time that you have in a day to do it, doesn't matter how much you like it. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. You're not going to do it. You might do it at some point in time because there are certain days or weeks or seasons of our life where everything is going great and we've got extra time and we're not too stressed and our schedules aren't crazy and our kids aren't doing like 18 sports events in one weekend. And we've got like, somehow we decided to have 3 kids and then we decided to put all 3 kids into extracurricular sports activities. Oh, and then we really messed up and we decided to let all 3 kids do travel sports and travel teams. And screw my life. What the heck was I thinking? Oh, that's right. We love our kids and we want to set our kids up for the best opportunities in life. And part of that is doing all those things. I get it, right? But if the things that you're doing to get healthy and to get toned take more time than you can afford during those seasons of your life, you're going to throw them to the side. You're not going to do them and you're not going to stay toned. So during one part of the year when sports season is in like full swing, you're going to get untoned, AKA you're going to get fatter. And then you're going to have to figure it out later unless you actually learn how to prioritize convenience. How do I work out? How do I make my workouts super efficient to where I get great results with less time? How do I have food options inside and outside of the home that give me everything that I need? They taste amazing, but they require very little time and effort. These are important things that oftentimes just don't get optimized for. People don't know how to optimize for them. And again, these are all things that we teach, things that we do with our clients at Healthy and Whole. Whether you guys work with us or not, that's on you. But I'm telling you, if you start focusing on and prioritizing these things, it will start to change the sustainability of your results. Lastly, is you've got to focus on your personal growth, which is really just a fancy way of saying you've got to get your mental and your emotional health in a good place. Because it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter how much you enjoy your healthy food and your workouts and your lifestyle. It doesn't matter how quick and easy and convenient it is. If your mental and your emotional health is all over the place because you don't have healthy ways of managing stress and you don't have ways of looking at the world that don't make you stressed all the time, and just all sorts of stuff that goes into that, then your mental and your emotional health is going to be like a roller coaster all the time. It's going to be up, it's down, it's all over the place. And not only does it just kind of stink to be on that roller coaster, I've been there. I know exactly what that feels like. But it also, with things like emotional eating and stress eating in particular, when you're on that like mental emotional roller coaster and your mental and your emotional health is not in a good place, then your food decisions go all out the window, your motivation and your energy just gets sapped, and everything falls apart. So it's not enough to learn about all this stuff. It's not enough to focus on prioritizing enjoyability. It's not even enough to make it all super convenient. We also, for the real, true long-term sustainability of all of this, you got to work on your inner self too. You got to work on your heart, and you've got to work on your mind and your spirituality as well. Not super sexy, but very true. And anybody who's out there that's listening to this, I challenge that there's no one out there who doesn't know that there's truth in what I'm saying right now. So hopefully this has been helpful in helping you to understand what it actually takes to lose that body fat down to a place where you actually are going to get toned, and also how to start focusing on the right things to make sure that you're going to stay there. Now, like I said, my name is Matt Portwood. I am the founder of Healthy and Whole, which is a sustainable weight loss coaching program. And this is what we do with clients. And so when I do free trainings like this, I hope that you guys will take what I teach you guys, and I hope you take it out there and actually put it into use. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time, and I don't want to waste my time. So if this has been helpful, at least tell me down in the comments. At least leave me a comment and say, yes, Matt, this was helpful. I learned one thing, just even one thing. And hey, if you actually did learn one thing from this, tell me what you learned down in the comments. I want to know what you learned. But also, if you learned something, and one of the things that you learned is that like, hey, I kind of like this guy, and they sound like they know what they're doing, and I bet they could probably help me like they've helped all these other people, then feel free to comment down below or reach out to us directly. Feel free to message me, depending on what platform you're on. And other than that, if you're on YouTube, if I actually post this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the like button. If you're on some other platform and you see this and you haven't followed or liked or subscribed, all that stuff, make sure you do it if you want more content like this. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.